following email, sent to South Wales Police on the 20th of December 2022, received a reply giving it the occurrence number 2200425212. Subject matter: report to South Wales Police about Councillor Stephen Karl Hunt, NEATH Talbot Council leader, misconduct in public office, potential link to the deaths of John and Margaret Jackson, Ruth Madoc, previously residing at Heol y Glyn, Glynneath, NEATH Talbot. Our reference 2022-1220 A-EM-RREL-Hunt-Initial-Police-Report. Distribution, action and potential. Purpose: pause the video to see the recipients of this email. Email body: Dear DS Peach, South Wales Police 101 and other recipients, in a previous email in relation to the Michael Pugh election offences, I provided you with the link occurrence 2100132983 to the Glynneath Democide Police Report, which I have defined for South Wales Police as a corporate manslaughter offence. Following this report, I have made public this information for the convenience of the relevant investigating officers and their inquiries at the following internet address: walkaroundwales.com. See the rest of the address on the screen for its location upon that site. I have not received an update or any communication apart from a receipt of the report since reporting this offence. It should be noted that corporate manslaughter is a violent crime. Can I ask for an update from South Wales Police, please? What actions and lines of inquiries have the force taken in relation to my report? I have over the last 2 years provided South Wales Police, Natural Resources Wales, Glynneath Town Council and NEATH Talbot Council with clear evidence that leading NEATH Talbot Borough Council and Glynneath Town Council public officials have blatantly covered up a toxic waste dump in Glynneath that has planning permission for a housing development. Council officials have, during this period, manipulated information, used blocking tactics, directly refused to investigate blatant offences, used deception, generated hate campaigns and made threats of violence against myself and other residents surrounding the development. They have refused to follow government protocols in relation to an amount of identified toxic waste and potentially unidentified reported toxic waste. This waste is almost certainly affecting human health and killing residents that live near the site. Among these residents, I am including Mr. John Jackson and Mrs. Margaret Jackson, also known as the actress Ruth Madoc, who lived for a number of years in close proximity to the toxic waste dump. I would ask that South Wales Police please add the following information to the report 2100132983 and any additional information that may arise in relation to an investigation into the material and/or pathological cause of Mrs. Jackson's recent fall along with the previous fall in 2019. Please also add John's heart attack in 2009 that can potentially be linked to contamination and his recent death. Cause unknown but believed to be a form of cancer which may be connected. In the interest of openness and transparency, I would strongly suggest that the two police forces copied to this email forward this email to the relevant coroner for any inquest that may take place into the nature of Mrs. Jackson's, Ruth Madoc's fall and subsequent death. I would posit that council corruption at Neath Talbot County Borough Council may have had an effect in the circumstances relating to the cause of the fall that eventually led to Mrs. Jackson's death. This information I believe to be relevant to any inquiry into the death of Mrs. Jackson. However, I would define the main purpose of this email is to make a report to South Wales Police that the current council leader at Neath Talbot Council, Stephen Karl Hunt, is a corrupt public official who is working with other corrupt public officials and unscrupulous housing developers to potentially cause the death of residents surrounding the Heol y Glyn landfill site in Glynneath. There are three main corruption incidents that are currently causing and or will in the future cause the death of Glynneath residents. In a series of planning approvals between 2008 and 2010, the council failed to follow contaminated land protocol at the site and ignored a human health risk assessment, allowing a demolition contractor to tip further unlicensed and unregulated waste. P 2020/0195, October-November 2020, despite reports from several residents that the developer Enzo Homes was breaking planning conditions, the council refused to investigate residents' reports and allowed Enzo Homes to spread contaminated land around the site and remove some to an unlicensed facility in Powys. Contamination was exposed and was misrepresented by the council, and this is potentially killing residents as we speak. P 2020/08163. Sometime in the future, plans were passed in March 2021 without going through the relevant committee process for no other reason than to remove the safety conditions of testing for chemical contamination on a spoil heap that had already been tested and found to be contaminated in 2008 and in October 2020. The same spoil heap has had eyewitness reports of barrels of toxic waste buried in the heap. These plans, P 2020/0863, allow the developer to move the spoil heap containing contamination next to properties bordering the site. As the leader of the council, it is his role to ensure the purpose of the council is upheld. Neath Talbot Council exists to serve and represent the interests of its citizens and communities. We strive to improve the economic, social, environmental and cultural well-being of all our people. The purpose of the council is a moral one, to care for the citizens of Neath Talbot, the key words in the purpose being environmental and well-being. Councillor Hunt has been made aware and provided evidence of many environmental rules, regulations and council protocols broken by the public officials at Neath Talbot Council that has almost certainly affected the well-being of the residents surrounding the site. He has a duty to investigate contaminated land concerns in his role as a scrutiny committee chair or to report these instances via the council whistleblowing policy or another method of reporting. He has a duty of care to ensure that these instances are fully investigated and that they comply with the purpose of the council of which he is the leader and that contaminated land protocol is followed. In this instance, I refer here to the Public Interest Disclosure Act 1998, offers protection to workers from any detriment from their employer that arises from the worker making a protected disclosure. To qualify as a protected disclosure, the disclosure must satisfy a number of requirements under PIDA 11. The worker must have made a qualifying disclosure. This is a disclosure of information which, in the reasonable belief of the worker, tends to show one or more of the following. A. That the criminal offence has been committed, is being committed, or is likely to be committed. That a person has failed, is failing, or is likely to fail to comply with any legal obligation to which he is subject. That a miscarriage of justice has occurred, is occurring, or is likely to occur. That the health and safety of any individual has been, is being, or is likely to be endangered. That the environment has been, is being, or is likely to be damaged. That information tending to show any matter falling within any of the preceding paragraphs has been, or is likely to be, deliberately concealed. Councillor Hunt, we believe, has not followed protocol in reporting environmental crimes and public official administration crimes at NEATH Talbot Council in respect to points A, B, C, D and F of the Public Interest Disclosure Act 1998. Instead, he is using system rules and regulations to prevent these crimes from being reported, made public and or investigated by the relevant regulatory authorities, namely South Wales Police, Natural Resources Wales and Wales Audit Office. He is in effect using democracy as a weapon to cover up the crimes of the council and to endanger the lives of members of the community he is elected to lead. This in itself is a crime known as misconduct in public office, which I am reporting to you today. I would also suggest that because corporate manslaughter is a violent crime, he is also guilty of crimes of violence and potential violence. P 2020/0863 against the residents whose lives he has placed in danger or whose deaths he may have caused. Further information. The latest residents to die from illnesses or other causes that can be potentially linked back to toxic waste as a contributing cause are Mrs. Margaret Jackson, known as the actress Ruth Madoc, and her husband John Jackson. Based upon public information, we can see that Mrs. Jackson died in an operation from complications of a fall. The neurological and physical mechanism that caused the fall may potentially be linked to the toxic waste that has been exposed in the vicinity of Mrs. Jackson's home. The fall may have been caused by a neurological disorder, the pathogenesis of which could be linked back to the toxic waste. Falling over is an early symptom of most neurodegenerative disorders. It should be noted that Mrs. Jackson had been living next to the site and has potentially been exposed to toxic waste since at least 2008, when the site was first tested, found to be contaminated, and land contamination protocol was not followed. People living around the site have been dying of rare neurological disorders, some of which can be linked to contamination. Barrels that may contain toxic waste being buried at the site and extensive dust that have been reported to the council have not been acted upon. Toxic waste has been identified at the site, and NEATH Talbot Council have failed to follow the contaminated land protocols in relation to this waste. The council were made aware of this, and they still refuse to follow their own contaminated land protocol. There is evidence that points to the chemical testing documents having been tampered with. Councillor Hunt has been provided with this information, and the Planning Department have refused to answer questions relating to these documents. Documents published which highlight the health problems suffered by residents have been destroyed by serving councillors on more than one occasion. Stephen Karl Hunt has been supplied these documents, and he has refused to take action in relation to the contents or acknowledge their existence. To provide evidence of one such an instance, I refer to point D of the above PIDA Act, that the health and safety of any individual has been, is being, or is likely to be endangered. and a chain of communication between myself, Councillor Hunt, and the Glynneath Town Councillor Jennifer Herbert between the 2nd of March 2021 and the 1st of March 2022, which contains several instances of Councillor Hunt refusing to observe the purpose of the council and refusing to investigate clear evidence of corruption within his council. Instead of following correct protocol, Councillor Hunt can be seen to be suggesting inappropriate referrals, including one instance of referring me to my own children to investigate the air quality. We have made this information public, and you can view it by following via this link. walkaroundwales.com specific page. On the 21st of June 2021, I pre-warned Councillor Stephen Hunt, the current council leader, that Mrs Jackson, Ruth Madoc, was a potential victim of his council's malpractice. And at the same time I made him aware that the legal and monitoring officer at NEATH Talbot Council, Craig Griffiths, was working together with the planning department to cover up corruption. I stated, "You were aware of corruption within the planning department, and so you have a duty to report this. The legal officer is working with the planning department, and so your duty is to report this to your fellow councillors other than the planning committee. Meanwhile, you should keep your fingers crossed that Ruth Madoc, who lives next to the site, and Max Boyce don't get ill from contamination-related illnesses." Following on from this at a later date, he failed to follow government guidelines and protocol in line with his role as the chair of the scrutiny committee with decision-making powers in relation to identified contaminated land. He refused to provide a duty of care to protect the people, including Mr and Mrs Jackson. On the 29th of October 2021, Councillor Hunt arranged a meeting with the relevant heads of department at NEATH Talbot Council and stated that the purpose of the meeting is to specifically discuss your issues as you brought them to me in my role as Chairman of Regeneration and Sustainable Development Scrutiny Committee. Land contamination falls under my portfolio, so am I obliged, if asked by any member of the public, to try and find answers to their questions. We supplied Councillor Hunt with 5 questions, which Councillor Hunt referred to the council heads of department, who refused to answer them. Post-meeting on the 5th of November, he stated, "I'm sorry this isn't more positive information, but I will continue in my capacity to make sure the site in question does not cause any health problems for you or the residents living close to the site. I am a one-man band, however, and not sure how much influence I have on this local authority, I am sorry to say." It should be noted that in stating, "I am a one-man band," this is a direct refusal to take action in his role as the chair of the relevant scrutiny committee and part of an elected body of people's representatives. It is a deliberate refusal to follow the correct protocol in relation to contaminated land and the protection of the public. Following this, the heads of department at NEATH Talbot Council continued to refuse to answer his questions, and in my final communication at the end of the chain on 1st of March 2022, I provided relevant information to Councillor Hunt that he refused to take action on. This included the following statement. I would suggest that the actions of the NEATH Talbot Council Planning Department, including Mr Morris in relation to the planning approval P2020-0863, show complete disregard for human health. If we refer again to the 6 elements of PIDA, that a criminal offence has been committed, is being committed or is likely to be committed, that a person has failed, is failing, or is likely to fail to comply with any legal obligation to which he is subject, that a miscarriage of justice has occurred, is occurring, or is likely to occur, that the health and safety of any individual has been, is being, or is likely to be endangered, that the environment has been, is being, or is likely to be damaged, that information tending to show any matter falling within any of the preceding paragraphs has been, or is likely to be, deliberately concealed. I would suggest that the actions of the NEATH Talbot Council Planning Department, including Mr Morris in relation to the planning approval P2020-0863, show a complete disregard for human health. Being a member of the Planning Committee and the chair of the relevant Scrutiny Committee, Councillor Hunt is fully aware of the implication of the planning approval Pre-2020-0863, which removed the chemical testing conditions of a spoil heap that had previously been tested and found to be contaminated. It also allowed a developer to move the spoil heap next to the properties bordering the site. His refusal to investigate this in his role as Scrutiny Committee Chair or to report this to the relevant organisation indicates that he is deliberate in his actions and willing to cause the death of residents to support Planning Department malpractice. The full communication from myself to Councillor Hunt provided him with several other instances of concern. Beginning of communication. Thank you for your report received in your role as Chair of the Regeneration and Sustainable Development Scrutiny Committee and for submitting our questions to the Head of Planning and Public Protection in this role. It is disappointing that Mr Morris has refused to answer all the relevant questions relating to the current planning application and that the recent associated planning approval and to provide evidence of the correct procedures followed for land contamination in relation to the historical contamination tests. This is concerning to us as residents surrounding the site. I would suggest that the actions of the NEATH Talbot Council Planning Department, including Mr Morris in relation to the planning approval P2020-0863, show complete disregard for human health. There is no valid reason why the chemical testing of land that has previously been tested and found to be contaminated should be removed from the conditions. It must be accepted, therefore, that the only reason that the P2020-0863 planning application existed was to support the developer Enzo in the breaking of conditions to cover up the historical malpractice of the planning department. This historical malpractice allowed the Cuddy Group to tip toxic waste next to our homes for a number of years. As can be seen in the documentation previously submitted to you, this has almost certainly resulted in the deaths of the residents living closest to the site. The result of the P2020-0863 approval means that the current application for the Heol y Glyn site will allow toxic waste to be deposited next to our homes. If you search the redistribution of soil levels in application P2021-0546, you will see that in some areas of the site, this will mean the raising of the current levels of the ground with toxic waste by over 5 metres. We are deeply concerned that the contamination testing submitted with application P2021-0546 lacks the supporting human health risk assessment as required by the Council Contamination Land Strategy, and the results of the testing can also be seen to have been potentially tampered with to suit Planning Department malpractice, as was identified in our unanswered questions. I would urge you please to request a human health risk assessment from the Planning Department. This is key safety information. I would also urge you to personally investigate the chemical testing information submitted to NEATH Talbot Council for the planning application P2021-0546. End of communication. The following playlist on YouTube provides an in-depth analysis of several historical incidents that may have caused Mrs Jackson's and the deaths of other residents. It shows the methods the council have used, including Stephen Karl Hunt, to cover up historical, current and future malpractice at the site and to endanger the lives of residents living in another county, Powys. However, this playlist is in its infancy and there are several other instances that provide evidence of the intention of NEATH Talbot Council to deliberately support the endangerment of human life surrounding the site. I have contacted Mrs Jackson's agent, Belfield and Ward, but have not received a reply. I've copied the agent again to this email, and I would suggest that the agent and Mrs. Jackson's surviving family may want to consider lodging a formal complaint against NEATH Talbot Council and request an investigation by South Wales Police and Wales Audit Office into the actions of the council and the actions of the developers Cuddy Group and Enzo Homes. This is an extract from that communication. Beginning of the communication. Apologies for the rather blunt and distressing subject matter. I live in Glynneath, close to where Ruth lived for several years and was friendly with Ruth's husband, John. Ruth and John lived next to a toxic waste dump, and the local council have hidden this information for at least the last 14 years. Two people living approximately 100 metres away from where Ruth and John lived have died of an extremely rare neurodegenerative disorder, progressive supranuclear palsy, which can be linked to toxic waste. This disorder starts with patients losing their balance and falling over, notably falling over backwards. I've produced a research paper on these deaths, which can be found online. There have been several other potential deaths from toxic waste in the area. Once again, I apologise for the distressing subject matter. End of communication. Please excuse any typos, changes in fonts, etc. This is not my job. I am not getting paid. I'm trying to support my family and the members of my community who have placed their trust in me to protect them from public officials like Stephen Karl Hunt. The reason for this communication at this point in time is because the information I'm providing you is time sensitive. Acting on it now may and will prevent further deaths. Toxic waste has been exposed at the site, barrels of potential waste have been reported as being buried at the site, and no action has been taken other than to remove the safety element of testing the area for chemicals. Planning permission has been given to move the toxic waste closer to homes without testing it first. Finally, I leave you with the words of Ruth Noyle, the wife of the local councillor, as I left a public meeting in which the council leader, Stephen Karl Hunt, and her husband, Councillor Simon Noyle, were speaking less than 2 weeks before Mrs. Jackson's death. She looked me in the eye and she said, "I hope there's poison there and you die." East Glynneath residents against contamination post-communication protocol. I will make this information public on glynneath.wales in line with the refusal of all previously mentioned Welsh Government-related public bodies' refusal to act in line with the purpose of the Welsh Government, which is to help improve the lives of people in Wales to make our nation a better place in which to live and work. Also in the interest of openness and transparency. If you believe anything I say in this communication to be unjust or unlawful, please respond accordingly so that I may change the information or provide counter evidence to challenge your opinion. Please note that personal opinions will be discounted unless counter evidence is provided to support that opinion. Regards, David Richards, Director, Rugby Relics Limited. For myself and on behalf of the members of the East Glynneath residents against contamination who are still alive.